Welcome everyone to Magic with Class. I'm Jeremy Class. So today I'm going to do something a little different on Magic Arena. I finally took the time to put in a bunch of redemption codes for free packs, and I opened a few already, but then I got the idea to show you some of the packs that I'm opening to see what cards I get. So I already opened a bunch of packs from M20. M20 has since rotated out of standard, but I can still play the cards in historic. I didn't get anything too good out of the M20 cards. I didn't get any mythics, so I'm hoping to pull something good in one of these packs. So this is Throne of Eldraine. Actually, I did open one mythic wild card in one of the previous packs that I opened, so that was actually an amazing pull. So let's see what I get. This is Throne of Eldraine. I got a common wild card, which is okay. It's any common. Some decks require certain commons, and they require 4 of them to function. So that's always decent, I guess, to have. This is not bad for a common. A 4/4 for 4 with trample. It's a wolf, so maybe in a wolf tribal deck. But when it enters, it also creates a food token, which is pretty decent. So Golden Egg I've also seen played before, especially in Blink strategies. I think some Urian decks actually play Golden Egg because as soon as it enters, you automatically draw a card. It can fix your mana a little, and it can gain you a little bit of life. So those are options that I rarely see used, but they are there. The food subtype does do something, but haven't really seen a deck use food efficiently, not in a while anyway. This guy, it's a wall, 5/7 for 7. Nope, this is limited fodder. I don't think I would ever play this in a deck. This is an adventure card. In a really aggro deck, I could see this seeing play. It's 3 power for just 2 mana. It can't block, but then again, with that toughness, I don't think you really want to use this for blocking. It's a knight. There's plenty of knight support in Throne of Eldraine. And it's also a dwarf, which I think we will be seeing more support for within the next year, both in paper and on Magic the Gathering Arena. There is, after all, a Dungeons and Dragons crossover set being released, as well as Kaldheim, which might have some dwarves for us. This card overall is very good for a common. I could easily have seen it being uncommon. Claim the Firstborn. This is actually okay in Commander. There are a lot of Commander decks that want to steal an opponent's creatures and then sacrifice it, and this is one of the cheapest options. The drawback, of course, is that it doesn't work if the card has a converted mana cost of 4 or more, but otherwise this is an active treason effect for just 1 mana, which is pretty good. I actually have this card. It's a 2/2 flyer for 2. Once again, it has that restriction of can't block. But you can also use the Sorcery Adventure option, which just returns a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Both sides are kind of overcosted, but since you do get to use both potentially, this card is pretty decent. It is an uncommon. It does have the human and knight tribal type, so it is well supported. Overall, this is decent. I don't think it's seen the play that it maybe deserves. And let's get to the rare. Wicked Wolf. Funny I was talking about food because Wicked Wolf is probably one of the better payouts for a food type deck. And in a food style deck, I think Wicked Wolf is actually pretty decent. So it enters, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So it's only a 3/3, so it can kill anything that's 2/2 or below and probably survive. But it can also kill other things because you can sacrifice a food, any food, including Golden Egg, and you put a +1/+1 counter on it, so it becomes a little stronger, able to fight stronger things and kill them. But it also gains Indestructible, so you will be able to survive even if you fight a creature with enough power to kill it. There is a drawback. If you do this, it does tap it, but if you are attacking with it, that won't come into play. It's kind of weird how this card works with food and this card works with food, both wolves, and yet they don't produce their own food to sacrifice. Oh, actually, this one does. So I guess in limited, you want to play some fierce witch stalkers with Wicked Wolf. This one produces the food that the Wicked Wolf can then utilize. I guess the reason why so many wolf cards in Throne of Eldraine mention food is because usually wolves in fairy tale stories are trying to get food in some way, usually not through morally acceptable means. So that's kind of interesting. Oh, we have one more pack of Throne of Eldraine, I believe. Let's see what we get. I like how they open the packs. This is not bad in a very aggressive adventure deck. It's a 1/1 flyer for 1, which is not good on its own. Fairy is a supported type, but not in white. Most fairies are usually blue or black. And there were actually a couple of early green fairies, but not many white ones. This one, I don't really like these style of equipment that attach themselves as soon as they enter. This one can't attach itself to a human, it has to be non-human. And the equipped card cost is quite enormous, so another one of these Fierce Witch Stalkers, which just create a food, but a 4/4 trample for 4 and limited on a common is good enough already. The fact that it also creates a food token for you to utilize makes this a very high pick, I would think, as a common in Theros Limited, but I could be wrong. Alright, what do we have here? An Ogre Knight. Gives another knight, another attacking knight menace until end of turn. Meh, again, this is limited fodder. In a knight deck, you're not going to play this. It's just not good enough. And let's see, once again, this is limited fodder. For a 4 cost creature that is only a 3/2 is just nowhere near good enough. Human Warrior are 2 supported types. And there is an adventure part of this, which just gives the creatures +2/+2 for 2 mana. But overall, I just don't think this is strong enough to really see play, even in an adventure-style deck. Clockwork Servant. I do like the art. It's a 2/3 for 3. And if you spent the same color of mana to cast this cost, so if you spend 3 mana and it was all the same color, you get to draw a card. So in a monocolored deck, this is okay. A 2/3 creature that lets you draw a card upon entering is alright, but if you are running a monocolored deck, one of the big benefits is that you get to play a whole bunch of colorless lands, potentially. So I don't know if I would give up running a whole bunch of utility colorless lands to play something like Clockwork Servant just to draw a card. I don't think this is good enough. Let's see. Oh, this is decent. It's a sorcery speed, 1 mana, 1 black mana card that is a discard effect. I don't think this is quite as good as something like Duress or Despise, but you can choose a non-land card, and that player exiles that card. If the card that they exiled is not blacked, then you have to exile a card from your own hand. This was part of a cycle that, again, kind of leans into that monocolor theme that Theros had. I don't think using 2 of your cards to get rid of one of your opponent's cards in their hands is good enough. This is good if you can target a black card, but there are 5 colors of Magic, so there's only about a 20% chance of that happening. Probably less, because if your opponent is running a 2-color deck and black is one of their colors, they may not have a black card currently in their hand. So I don't know, time will tell. This could be a sneaky little card that actually does see competitive play someday. The fact that you have to exile the cards, though, is both a benefit and a drawback. You could have used this card to force yourself to discard a card you'd rather want in the graveyard, maybe to reanimate. But the fact that it exiles your own card when you discard makes it hard to get that card back. However, the same can be said about your opponent. Now it's going to be very difficult for them to get the card you exiled back. Okay, so the rare is a land, and these lands are actually quite good. So it enters tapped, which is never good on the land. But if you control just one island, this comes into play untapped. It adds a blue, and it does have another ability. You can pay 4 and tap this land to scry 2. Overall, I think in a mono blue deck, I would take out a basic land and put this in there for sure. In a 2-color deck, I would probably do the same because you're running shock lands, you're probably running other lands that have land types even if they're not basic. So this is very close to being better than a island. In fact, many would say that it is just superior because of the ability to scry 2 in the late game, especially in a blue style deck. So, I don't know. I definitely like this cycle in Theros. The land cycle was pretty powerful, I would say, although it favored monocolor strategies, but that's alright. Let's go into Theros, which was another set with a monocolor theme. Banishing Light I already have. This actually is decent. I got defeated by an enchantment deck running Nessian Wanderer. The one thing I don't like about the Constellation cards in Theros Beyond is that no card with Constellation was also an enchantment. Part of the power of Constellation in the previous Theros sets was that you could play a whole bunch of Constellation cards that were also enchantments, so they worked with each other. Now this makes you really think about deck building because you want to have a certain number of cards with Constellation, but also a certain number of enchantments to trigger Constellation. So actually, it can be very difficult to properly balance a deck with the Constellation cards and the cards that are needed to support this keyword, but I guess that's neither here or there, I guess. But whenever an enchantment enters in the Constellation, they all have that ability. You can look at the top 3 cards of your library, you get a land, and you can put it into your hand. So, overall, this is probably something you want to play down early. It will make sure you pretty much have a land drop to play on every turn that you can cast an enchantment, which is always good. No one likes to be landlocked. No one likes to play a game where they're stuck on maybe 2 lands and can't do anything. So this card can help, especially in an enchantment theme. This is an enchantment creature, so you could use it with Nessian Wanderer, although this is a very weak enchantment creature. It just gives your creatures that enter after it +0/+1. It could be decent with, oh no, I'm sorry, not when it enters. Whenever another creature attacks, it gets +0/+1 until end of turn. That's just not good enough. Maybe if it gave +1/+1, even then, this is just not a good card. Cool art though. Hero of the Games. So this is a card that does not have heroic, but it kinda does. So basically heroic was not keyworded in Theros Beyond. In the original Theros block, heroic was a keyword that triggered whenever you cast a spell that targeted the creature with heroic. So basically to reference heroic but not actually have to put many heroic cards in the set, they just did a couple of these. This is a 3/2 for 3, so already not terrible. Human Soldier hasn't seen support in a long time, and Soldier support is usually white. But whenever you cast a spell that targets this guy, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. That's not bad. So I guess these are kinda like paired with each other in a way because this can increase toughness and this can only increase power. I'd way rather play Hero of the Games over Glory Bearers. This is another enchantment. You're going to see a lot of them in Theros Beyond. It's an aura. You can only enchant a creature you control, so this doesn't go on your opponent's creatures, it just goes on yours. So when you do enchant your own creature, your opponent discards 2 cards, tiny bit overcosted because Mind Rock costs 3 mana, so what are you actually paying for? What's that extra mana getting you? Well, it's getting you an enchantment aura instead of a sorcery, which can be beneficial in some decks, but it's also giving your creature lifelink, which could be relevant, especially if you're fending off a red deck that's delivering a lot of damage to your face. However, I think there are better discard cards in Magic and Commander. This certainly wouldn't see any play. I don't think there's a Commander deck that both has a discard strategy and an enchantment strategy, but maybe you have such a deck, so let me know. Let's see. So test and training. Well, again, this only can enchant a creature you control. However, it will draw you a card as soon as it enters the battlefield, so it replaces itself. That's always good. And it does give the creature +1/+0 and trample. So I've seen a few enchantment decks run Setessan's Training pretty much just because it's going to enter the battlefield and automatically draw you a card. So in Enchantress strategies, where you have a bunch of Enchantress creatures out, and you enchant one of them with this, that can draw you a bunch of cards for a low cost of 2 mana. And you don't underestimate the +1/+0 and trample. Final Flare, cool name. So you need to sacrifice a creature or an enchantment to cast this. If you use a card that can steal one of your opponent's creatures, you can use this to sacrifice their creature so they don't get it back. Maybe you're using an act of treason-like ability. Well, what do you get? You get a instant that deals 5 damage to target creature. Nah, this needs to cost 1 mana for it to be playable. I think I mentioned Banishing Light, amazing card. This is just like a fixed version of Oblivion Ring, which does something very, very similar. I've seen many decks play Banishing Light, even in Commander. What's the rare? Not a good rare, in my opinion. It is a legendary creature, so it could be used in Brawl and Commander. It costs 5, 3 of anything and 2 blue for an elemental giant. It has flash, it has flying. When you cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or greater, that card costs 1 less to cast. It also can't be countered, which is a decent benefit. And, reducing high costing cards, even by 1, can be very valuable. However, I just think there are better cards. If you're playing this in a blue-green style deck, doesn't green have better ramp than this? But I could be wrong. Okay, let's go again. Theros Beyond. Common wildcard, always kind of useful. Some decks require commons, and some decks require 4 of a specific common. So it can be a pain to chase down commons. So the wildcards actually do help. Omen, this is part of the Omen cycle. Each of them had flash. Each of them had an enters the battlefield effect. And then they each had an effect that lets you sacrifice the enchantment to scry 2. That was kind of strange, because usually certain colors scry more than others, so it was kind of weird that there was an entire cycle of enchantments in every color that all let you scry 2 instead of doing something a little different for each color. So for 1 mana, this allows you to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is actually really good. This is a Raised Dead effect. Raised Dead itself costs 1 mana, but you get a lot of benefits for running this over Raised Dead. It's an enchantment for strategies that care about that. It has flash, so it is an instant speed card. And as I said, you can always, if you have extra mana later in the game and nothing to do with it, sacrifice this card to scry 2. So overall, this is good, and I don't see this card seeing a lot of play. I was just talking about Act of Treason style effects, and here's one. Portent of Betrayal, 4 mana, so it's kind of expensive, but you can gain control of a creature until end of turn. Untap it, and it gains haste, as these cards usually do, and it also lets you scry 1, so you're paying an extra mana just to scry 1, which I don't think is good enough. But I do know a few commander type decks that want to run every single take control until end of turn effect. So maybe, but control magic only costs 4 and lets you keep the card until your opponent destroys it. So I don't know. I don't really value Scry 1 that highly. I would play this over control magic, but maybe you're in a mono red deck. This is another card that basically has heroic without having heroic, and even the name kind of implies that's what they were going. Hero of the Pride, 2 mana for a 2/2, so already pretty good. It's a cat, which is getting more and more support by the year. Cats, I guess, are just ultra popular, so I do like the Leonin. I kind of don't like the house cats that are in our game right now. I think if a card has a creature type cat, I would prefer for it to be a Leonin, but maybe dogs, now that they have some tribal support, will become more popular than cat tribal, and we won't see cat tribal as much anymore. So whenever you cast a spell that targets this guy, again, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So this card and the other red card, Hero of the Games, that I opened, would make a decent heroic style deck. I've seen this card played in weaker versions of Mono Blue Mill. It's not good enough in that deck. If I wanted to attack in order to mill, I would just play Dimir Rogues, and this is not a rogue, so it's just not good enough. But if you have a smaller collection or are trying to build a mill deck but just don't have all the cards you needed, I can see how a 2/1 for 2 that when it deals damage mills 2 cards would be decent. Also, if you do power this card up with an enchantment aura or something like that, it mills equal to the damage dealt. So if you can raise its power to like 20 somehow, and this deals damage, then this can mill 20 cards. The fact that it has to deal damage instead of this being an attack trigger, though, makes this card significantly weaker. But here is an old favorite. It's Grey Merchant of Asphodel. This card probably needs no introduction. A lot of people call this guy Gary. He was in original Theros and saw a tremendous amount of play in mono black devotion decks, which were very strong in original Theros block. Mono blue devotion was also a very powerful deck during that era of the game. So it was actually a common in the original Theros block. It's been upgraded to uncommon here, and it's pretty obvious why this card is a powerhouse. I even see this sometimes played in mono black devotion right now in standard. Usually that standard deck uses Underworld Dreams, and it has Peer into the Abyss as the win condition, but I've been killed by Grey Merchant of Asphodel on Magic the Gathering Arena, and I'm sure many of you have as well. So for 5 mana, it's just a 2/4, so 4 toughness is okay, but not on a 5 mana card. So when it enters, each opponent loses X life, and you're gonna gain life equal to your devotion to black. So even if your board is empty, this will drain your opponent for 2. Your opponent will lose 2 life, and you will gain 2 life. This actually says each opponent, which makes it even more amazing in Commander, because if I drain everyone for 8, I will gain 8 life. So not bad. Good uncommon to pull. Probably the best uncommon in that set. Here's another decent uncommon. So its power is equal to your devotion to green. It's just that green didn't have that many good devotion cards. Especially in original Theros, it really didn't. And even in Theros Beyond, there are some payoffs for running a mono green deck, but Gigantosaurus, I guess, might be one, but So what does this do? Well, its power is equal to your devotion, so it's always going to be a 2/3 for 4, which is not good enough. But each other creature you control will get a +1/+1 counter when it enters the battlefield, and theoretically you can have this card be a 20 power creature if you have enough green pips on the battlefield. So what's the rare? Oh, not a particularly good rare. At least this is a land that enters untapped. It only taps for colorless though. And for 4 mana and a tap, you can remove target attacking or blocking creature from combat. So if you have 5 mana, every turn you can pretty much prevent a creature from being able to attack you. This is not as good as something like Maze of Ith. But if you have a colorless commander and you're just looking for utility lands, utility colorless lands that enter the battlefield untapped and then have a small beneficial ability, you could do a lot worse than the Labyrinth of Scoffles. And obviously this is a reference to the myth of the Minotaur in the Labyrinth. I think there is even a Minotaur that works with this card to drive home that reference. So, you know, it's a cool reference. I just don't really need this card. Maybe in a mono-color deck that I could run. Maybe in a mono green deck, which struggles with dealing with creatures. I could see this card seeing play in Commander. I'm sure it'll see play in a lot of one-color decks though. But the more colors you add, the more you probably want to avoid this. Okay, an uncommon wild card. Those are actually pretty helpful because while not all decks really need commons, and commons aren't particularly hard to get, some of the uncommons, to get 4 of them is actually quite annoying. So I'm glad I got that. Hydra's Growth. I've seen this in a +1/+1 counters deck. I've seen this in Hydra decks. It's not bad. 3 mana, you put a +1/+1 counter on enchanted creature, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you double the number of counters, +1/+1 counters on that creature. So if you drop a big Hydra that comes into play with, who knows, 5 +1/+1 counters, you play this, it automatically adds a counter, and then on your next turn, it'll double to 12. So this can get out of hand ridiculously. I actually really enjoy this card. I play this in my Skullbriar Commander deck as well. So I just enjoy this card. I've seen this card played against me. I just don't think it's that good. The creature loses all its abilities, and it's a fish, a blue fish with base power and toughness 0/1. This does stop Mutate, so it's pretty good in that strategy. Well, I guess this is better than Unsummon, right? Well, maybe not, because it does return a creature or an enchantment to its owner's hand, but it only works on your opponent. So I've seen cards like Unsummon used to save your own creatures. This can't do that. So is the added benefit of being able to return an enchantment worth not being able to save your own creatures? Maybe, depends on the style of deck, I guess. Okay, at least this is an instant, but there are cheaper cards that have this effect. In limited though, if you need some extra removal, you can do worse with this. It also gains you some life. Okay, this card I actually kind of like. So there is one at least tribal card that does support satyrs. This does put a 1/1 token into play for just 1 mana, but that creature can't even block. But you can use this repeatedly because for 3 mana and exiling 2 other cards, you can cast this for escape. So in a deck that wants to mill itself, I suppose, Satyr's Cunning would be decent. Red is usually not the color to do self-mill, however. But, you know, Dimir Rogues is especially popular, so I could see someone playing Satyr's Cunning in a deck to counter either Mono Blue Mill or Dimir Rogues. Okay, well, I already have one Temple of Plenty. Here is another, I suppose, not really what I was hoping for in the rare slot. These lands enter tapped, which is a huge drawback. The Scry is more useful than I think people realize. Sometimes Scry is the same as drawing a card. However, I would not play too many of these temples. This is actually a reprint as well. The original Theros had temple cards too. Overall, the temples were just not particularly well liked or particularly powerful lands. Yes, you would probably play a few, especially if you don't have anything else, but disappointing. I was hoping for a different rare. Well, thanks guys. Ooh, I have Ikoria, Core 21, and Zendikar Rising to open a little later, but I'm going to end this video now. I'm Magic with Class, always reminding you to gather with class. Tune in later where I will be opening these other packs. I should be uploading a video with some gameplay, and I will also probably be uploading a video either today or over the weekend talking about all of the Commander Legends spoilers. So Commander Legends has officially been spoiled. Every card has been spoiled. And it's been a while since I talked about some of the cards, so I probably won't go over a lot of the reprints, but tune in.